Okay, Friday, 14th of June, 2024. So, Bitcoin is gradually and then suddenly. So, there's a very interesting concept in economics called exponentials. And we see this in charts, and we see this explicitly so in the Bitcoin hash rate chart. Slowly, not much noticeable movement, nothing really happens, and all of a sudden, gradually, an inflection point is reached, something happens critically, and then just takes off and compounds and grows. Goes from there. In 1 year, there's more growth or more movement done in the past 10 odd years, for example. Gradually and slowly. Now, as you understand and recognize the game theory behind Bitcoin, you understand how over time the people who are involved in the space, the adopters, whatever else, would increase. Okay, as more people understand the fundamentals, the mathematical fundamentals, the first principles of Bitcoin, and recognize what that means for a lot of things, they follow the logic. Now, Bitcoin is gradually and suddenly because for years, not much will be happening, relatively speaking. Behind the scenes, things will be happening, movement. It'll be the innovators or the enthusiasts on the far left side of the bell curve in terms of crossing the chasm, the adopters, the adoption cycle. You could argue it hit mainstream on the 10th of January this year, 2024, when the ETFs were approved. Because that arguably gives it institutional approval, as in de-risking career risk, where anyone, financial advisors or otherwise, can recommend Bitcoin to institutions. Now, what that means, you could argue that's an inflection point. Only future historians will tell for certain, and they'll know for sure, but that could be an inflection point. We're saying before that, retail was front running, you could argue, Wall Street. Before that, everything didn't really particularly, you could argue, didn't matter, because at that moment there, everything changed. Now, Bitcoin is slowly, then suddenly, because in the grand scheme of things, the things that happened before then will be minor, will be insignificant. You could argue just hodl, but that's a whole other conversation. You could argue this. Some would say, it is said, it is reported, it is rumored you could do that. You tell me. Comment below. So it is gradually and suddenly because things will happen behind the scenes. Developers, businesses, who else will be doing things behind the scenes that then will be impactful in the years and decades from now. The idea, the layer 3, layer 4, layer 5 solution, that technology right now today could just be in the entrepreneur's mind, just an imagination, a twinkle in his eye. Or it could literally be on a whiteboard somewhere in the world as some engineers are designing and imagining and innovating and game theorying and strategizing what to do. These technologies that will be mainstream 5, 10, 20, 15, 30 years from now are only just an imagination in someone's mind right now. And as you understand the game theory, the adoption, the price increase, the secure network, the miners, that nice vicious flywheel, it's basically guaranteed, arguably guaranteed. More and more people will understand this, and I've said before in the past, not everyone in the world needs to understand it, just the key players, the key decision makers, the key people in certain places and locations, they need to understand it, the key leaders in banking and finance and institutions and government and wherever else. The critical mass of general public don't need to understand it, just the key decision makers. And at the same time, people don't need to understand Bitcoin for it to go suddenly everywhere. Just the key aspects of it, just the key principles. They don't need to understand everything about it, the Merkle trees and whatever else, and the nodes or nonces, all that kind of stuff in terms of mining, the tech side. Because that's what's called a hyper-Bitcoinized world, in the same sense that we live in a hyper-internal combustionized world where we don't need to understand how the internal combustion works for everyone to benefit from it. Everyone to benefit from cars and trucks and whatever else, anything that's diesel powered. Same principle. So it's gradually and suddenly because the big players, the big institutions out there that can be spending and investing millions and billions on this technology, mining or acquiring the asset, are not yet activated, not yet taking action, not yet doing anything. Just the small retailers are, or small family institutions, I forgot the name now, family banks, family houses. I think it's family houses. The small institutions, when we start, and the small companies as well, when we start seeing sovereign wealth funds, now that's the big leagues at that point. That's the next level up. And also, what's been said recently with regards to the SEC, Trump, and even in the Biden campaign, what's going on there, where 6 months ago, the things that are being said publicly, let's say by Trump, wanting to have all the Bitcoin mined in the USA, that would have been almost unthinkable 6 odd months ago. And yet here we are. It's out there. The Overton window, the realm of what's possible, what's likely, what's policy, what's normal to talk about, what's common sense, is shifting. It's changing. Fair enough, because more people are understanding it. The key players is giving it the rubber stamp of approval when Trump would say something, or the SEC approves something, or when a certain court case is won that's good for Bitcoin. These things are happening bit by bit, gently, step by step. Every single day we get 1 centimetre, one step closer to hyper-Bitcoinization in the grand scheme of things. And it's happening. Why? Because all the incentives are aligned. The vicious feedback loop, the game theory behind the technology, it's all slowly happening. And it's going to appear slowly on a day-to-day basis. Not much is going to happen. But in the grand scheme of things, big things happen all at once, when you least expect it, or when it's least predicted, or that moment there, midnight, and there's a big post here and there. So these things happen gently, step by step. It's, in one way, it's beautiful because it just shows the power of the world we live in now, where information can be disseminated around the world. There's a nice saying that bad news can go around the world before good news has a chance to put its shoes on. So it's beautiful in that way. Now, it's also gradual because on a day-to-day basis, small things don't really happen. Small things happen here and there, and only in the grand scheme of things, when you look at, say, a 15-year chart, or in general over the past 10 or so years, then we see big changes, then we see big movements. And then as we go, it becomes increasingly obvious that what happened. Of course there was an ETF, of course there was this, of course there was that, of course there would be a presidential candidate that would endorse it, of course, in hindsight, that's the key thing. Just how this election will not be, this 2024 US election, Bitcoin will be on the ballot, it'll be a topic of debate, increasingly so as more candidates are talking about it. But 2028 US presidential election, being anti-Bitcoin, will be politically unviable. It will not, that strategy will not be worth entertaining, will not be a winning strategy at all. It will not get the votes. So it's only going to be more and more pro-Bitcoin. Why? More and more incentives are being aligned to it. Wall Street is now incentivized to have more Bitcoin adoption. Why? Because they earn the fees from people buying their ETFs. And as the hash rate increases, more and more people will be willing to develop and build on the network itself. And therefore there'll be more adoption, because more infrastructure, more L2s, more L3s natively on the Bitcoin network itself. Just look at Aqua and Liquid. I think LBTC, Liquid and Aqua. And there are L2s being built on top of Bitcoin, not to mention Fediments and Lightning. So it's happening slowly, just every day, just bit by bit. And there's an interesting principle that when you're trying to predict the future, people would say something like, if you told me this was going to happen 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, had you told me today this would have been the thing, I would have said, that's crazy, that's ridiculous, insane, no way. So then I flip that around and say, right, well, what appears crazy to you today? Okay, this and that is crazy. No way this, no way that. Well, then the chances are that could be policy in the future. That could be normal in 5-10 years from now. It's possible, by the same logic. Makes sense. If you told me X or Y or Z, I would have laughed in your face. Okay, well, what makes you laugh in someone's face today? Okay, and that probably is a thing in the future. Fair enough. So it's gradually and suddenly, what you least expect happens. Moore's law, what could go wrong, could go wrong. And also the opposite's true. What could go right, could go right. The bell curve of possibilities. This is possible, that's possible. Well, both are very likely. Yeah. There's something else I wanted to mention about that Bitcoin. I just forgot. I'll come back to me. No worries. Maybe another episode. But otherwise, nice little day today. Raining a little bit now. Not bad. Not bad. But otherwise, you will see me tomorrow.